Okay. So welcome, welcome to the Aspen Institute, and welcome to the Future of Coaching, part of the Future Sports series, where we think through the biggest questions at the intersection of sports and society, and ask what if, always in service of the public interest, and always with a companion piece of content that anchors the conversation in research, reporting, or perhaps consensus. This series, the Future Sports Series, was launched a year ago with a meditation on the future of football that changed the conversation around how to best reform the game. It led to the publication of a white paper that considered the implications of a provocative question: what if flag was the standard way of playing the game until high school, as a way to address health and participation concerns? Who would win and who would lose if such a model took hold? Turns out, after thinking it through, the best as we could tell, it really was only going to be the helmet industry that would lose out. Many media outlets have cited our work in pushing the conversation forward, including most recently USA Today, which explored this issue on their pages recently. Oh, and I forgot to introduce myself, didn't I? Okay, big fail there. I'm Tom Ferry. I'm the executive director of the Sports and Society program at the Aspen Institute. So, again, welcome. Our Future of College Sports event, which was our second in this series last year, thought through the implications on athletes, education, women's sports, and high school sports if players could, like any other student, receive sponsorship dollars from organizations that see value. And just this morning, Congressman Mark Walker, Republican from North Carolina, announced plans to introduce legislation that would allow college athletes to do just that. Should this take hold, hopefully our dialogue and the excellent historical account of the issue written by our own John Solomon will be useful in navigating this new landscape. The Future of Sports Betting was the third in this series. And it discussed and examined the implications of the legalization of sports betting in any state that wishes to do so, and asked, what if we adopted Norway's model, where sports betting proceeds are directed back into community recreation? Norway is one of the healthiest nations in the world and produces, by the way, an amazing number of elite athletes at the other end of the pipeline. So what if states introduced that model, building on the lessons of Norway, as well as Colorado, which has used lottery money to fund community recreation, and Colorado is one of the most physically active states in this country as well. This is what we do at the Aspen Institute, and it's what we try and do in our program as well, is pump these big ideas into the bloodstream and see what takes. In December, we examined the future of sports activism and asked, what if activism was a regular feature in sports, not just a one-off situation here and there? And the consensus from our diverse set of panelists was, maybe it's not as disruptive as we think, and maybe it's actually more common than we assume it is, given all the less visible advocacy on big topics by athletes, teams, and even leagues on any number of topics at the local level and beyond. Maybe in sports, as with corporations in general, the public wants them to have a social conscience and stand for something. Today's event might be the most important yet in the entire series because of the importance of coaching in this country. There are more than 6 million adults working with kids. How coaches work with youth, the skills they teach, the values they impart, the ethics they model, and the lessons they share don't just build athletes, they build citizens. If coached well, children learn social and emotional skills that will serve them for life, helping them process failure and resolve differences with others. If you want to build the good society and a viable democracy, there are worse places to start than the playing field, where kids learn to work with others in a sports setting. In your packets, you have a report that we are releasing today, Calls for Coaches, which lays the groundwork for improving the culture of coaching in this country, starting with youth. Bravo to Jennifer Brown Lerner on our team, we're over there in the corner, yay, and Marty Fox, who helped, really drove this report here, put it together, as well as Susan Haviland and Kevin from the Susan Crown Exchange for supporting this work. And not just supporting this work, but actually creating it, requesting it. This wasn't our idea. This was their idea. They called us up and said, hey, we appreciate and focus on the area of social and emotional learning. What can we do in the area of youth coaching that would be valuable? It was the Susan Crown Exchange that recognized the opportunity for adults through coaching to teach these type of skills in after-school settings. So thank you to all of you for your leadership on that team. With that, I'd like to introduce John Solomon, our editorial director, who will moderate our first panel on the role of coaches in our society. I'll be back later to moderate a panel with Arnie Duncan and kids, followed by a panel with coaches, moderated by Aspen CEO Dan Porterfield, himself a former youth basketball coach who is extremely enthusiastic about this project because it aligns so much with what the Institute wants to do and how it wants to reach into, how it hopes to reach into communities. We'll also hear from Susan Crown and our team who will be presenting and helping you explore the report. So, John?
Great, thank you, Tom. Really appreciate it. Thanks for you all being here. Great crowd. So for the next 40 minutes, we're going to be talking about the role of coaches in our society today. We will have a brief audience Q&A near the end, so be thinking if there are any questions that you want to ask. And if you're watching the live stream or even if you're in person, feel free to join the conversation by Twitter using #CallsForCoaches. So what if coaches were measured less by wins and losses and more by the personal development of their athletes? To help us explore that question and the state of coaching today, we have a panel from 3 different levels of sports. We have a college coach, we have a pro athlete, we also have a high school coach. First to my immediate left is Sasha Surovsky. For 26 years, Sasha has been the head coach of the University of Maryland men's soccer team. His team has won 3 national championships, including in 2018, and has reached the College Cup, the sports Final Four, on 9 occasions. Sasha is one of only 9 coaches to win 3 NCAA Division I soccer championships. Next to Sasha is Natasha Cloud. Natasha is a point guard on the Washington Mystics basketball team, which reached the WNBA Finals in 2018. She started 72 games over the past 4 seasons with the Mystics, including all 9 playoff games last year. Natasha began her college career at the University of Maryland and then transferred to St. Joseph's. And next to Natasha is Linda Flanagan. Linda is a freelance writer, researcher, and editor whose work has appeared in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and the Atlantic, among others. She wrote a recent story titled "How Effective Sports Coaches Help Students Feel Understood at School." I highly recommend you all get a chance to read that. Linda is also a high school cross-country coach in New Jersey. So thank you all for being here, really appreciate it. I want to start by sort of defining what is a good coach, and I think it could sort of help set up this conversation throughout the whole day. Let's go down the line and just have each of you, real briefly, identify who is the most impactful coach in your life and why. Want to start with you, Sasha?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's not an easy question to answer because the whole reason why I got into coaching was because of the influence of coaches from the very youngest ages. You know, I was an immigrant, came here from Macedonia at 7 years old, couldn't speak the language. My parents were laborers, so many of my role models were coaches, were teachers. So originally wanted to become a teacher. And that was, I thought, this is really great, the influence these teachers have on me. And then as I got older and played sports, I saw that maybe I could combine teaching and coaching. And from my high school coaches, who are still some of my best friends today, to my college coaches and beyond, I just got real excited to coach. So I'll talk about 2 most influential people. Number 1 is my wife, who was a coach, a youth coach, college coach, national team coach. I think has an incredible view of what coaching is all about. The values she espouses are incredible. The other person is a performance coach, actually, who I've worked with for 30 years. Someone I met at a parent-child clinic in 1988 in Wisconsin, who is still my mentor, still someone that I rely on for my own personal development, someone that works with my teams, someone that helps me both shape, understand the values of coaching, but it's someone I grasp to. We developed a strong relationship and has been my mentor. His name's Rob Kehoe.
How about you, Natasha?
Yeah, I feel like for me at this point, every coach that I encountered, wow, sorry, every coach that I've encountered through my career has had a prominent role in where I'm at today. But the most influential for me was my CYO coach, I think when I was 10 years old. His name is Mike Coggin. And his role for me was super important because he was caring. He not only cared about me as his best player on the court, but he cared about me as an important person in our community as well. He cares about my family. Till this day, every time I go home, we make sure to have dinner with each other at least once or twice before I come back to DC, or at least when I come back into town. But his role in me as a player was phenomenal in making me confident in my abilities and my talents and also my leadership. And his influence in me as a person was monumental as well. So definitely Mike Coggin, my CYO coach.
How about you, Linda?
My most influential coach was my high school softball coach, who was unbelievably dedicated to our team and to the sport, and she was such a role model for what commitment is. And she also knew how to coach each individual. So she wouldn't scream at the people who didn't need to be screamed at, and she understood what motivated people. And it was just she was an exemplar of what commitment is.
Great. So I asked this question in part because many years ago, the legendary UCLA basketball coach John Wooden created his pyramid of success. This was his philosophy that made integrity and character the core values of success. And I always loved the definition of how he defined success for his players. And it is, success is peace of mind, which is a direct result of self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to do the best of which you are capable of becoming. I think it's an incredible definition of success, but I suspect these days that's not the definition of success for too many coaches in America. I wanted to talk a little bit about what is the role of a coach right now, not what we want it to be, but what is actually happening on the ground.
John, before I start, John Wooden's pyramid of success is the first thing I put in my locker when I became a college head coach. At the very core of it, on the left-hand side is industrious, hard work. On the right side is have fun, enthusiasm. It's a very valuable pyramid, and every coach should have it in their file, in their locker room, because the attributes, the skills, the traits that he talks about are pivotal to the enjoyment as a coach, enjoyment as a player, and really puts in perspective what it is. But look, what is coaching about? I think part of what we're talking about today is we have to really kind of get back to and redefine what coaching is. I think we've lost our way in what coaching is. I think players have lost their way, why they play. And I think we have to get back to the point and say, why am I playing sports as a player? Why am I coaching as a coach? Coaching is a noble profession. Coaching is a very influential role. It's a privilege that we have, whether it's a U10 coach, whether it's a college coach, a professional coach. It's a massive responsibility. And I think we have to make sure coaches understand what they're undertaking, that they are going to influence the lives of young people. The question is, how will they influence it, positively or negatively? They will influence it for sure. And I think part of the discussion today and part of what we're talking about is, I think we all want to influence it positively. So therefore, how do we generate the skill set to do that? How do we come back to that goal, those traits, to really be what I call a transformational leader, someone that helps transform your life through sports, because that's why I became a coach. Through this soccer ball, through this green field, to teach life lessons, to help people become the best they can be. So that, 20, 30, 40 years from now, they can look back the way you look back on your coaches and say, that coach helped me become a better person, helped me overcome these things. And I think that's what we have to. And I think some of that, quite frankly, has been lost.
Natasha, what do you see with coaching these days?
Yeah, I feel like first I'll speak on me as a player, especially at the professional level. It's easy to get lost in, okay, this is my career now. This is what I get paid to do. I get paid to play basketball. I get paid to win games. And sometimes you can lose yourself within that as a player. And so for me, the biggest thing that I've always honed in on is know your why. Know why you're doing what you're doing, know who you're doing it for. And for me, it's always been, my why is I love basketball. I have such a passion for basketball, even at such a young age. My why is my family. They always keep me grounded. They're my stableness in the craziness of what a professional career can be. And so I think that's always a big thing that can also translate over into coaching. Know your why. Why did you get into it? I think right now, coaching, as Sasha said, it can be a little transactional. You know, there's a lot of pressure on coaches now to win games, and especially the higher levels that you get, the higher the expectations for coaches are. So I think people can get lost in that sometimes and forget why they got into it. And especially when you're talking about the collegiate and the professional level, I think sometimes we do forget that we have such fragile young men and women that are 18 to 23 years old. You know, I'm 27 years old now, but I think we forget that sometimes we take on that role of being a second parent at that next level. I've always looked at my college coaches as a second mom to me. You know, our parents are entrusting the coaches with our children and making sure that they've done their work from the ages of babies until 18, and now it's time to turn them over to their coaches and help them develop into strong young men and women. And I think sometimes we can get lost in the expectations of those higher levels, and that's unfortunate.
Linda, what do you see? And particularly, who's driving this shift?
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to get to. I think, well, for one thing, that pressure to get results is increasingly, it's increasingly happening at earlier ages. So even at the high school level, there's such enormous pressure on coaches to produce results and to, deliver kids who can then go to play in college or get access to a better college because they can play there. And I think, a driving force behind this is the parents, honestly, pressing not only the coaches but the athletic directors and the administration to, take it up a notch, make it better, make it more serious. Let's get results, and that can force coaches to become more transactional. Even if you don't want to be, but that can be the effect of it. And I don't know if you all are familiar with the Syracuse study of high school coaches a few years ago. It said 58% of high school coaches had thought about quitting because of parents. And another 82% said that the parents had gotten more difficult and more hard to deal with over the course of their coaching career. So it's increasingly a problem for coaches even at the high school level.
Sasha, the NCAA and colleges talk often about developing young people as a whole, right? The full person when they're talking about athletes. We know in reality, for the most part, coaches get fired if they don't win enough games. So what is the incentive for a coach to produce happy, healthy, well-rounded people when we know that there is a bottom line related to winning and losing?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of mixed messaging out there because I think, every college coach I know comes in with the idea that they want to help develop the whole student athlete. They want to help develop the whole person. But unfortunately, if you go a couple of years with a sub 500 record, you could be doing an unbelievable job, better than anybody, but you're going to lose your job because at the end of the day, this is the mixed messaging that is happening, is that there isn't a great mechanism, and I think some schools do a pretty good job of it, but there isn't a great mechanism to do that. Part of it is that there's a lot of change of leadership in colleges. Different athletic directors come in and they look at the first opportunity to make a change, so they do because they want their own people. And sometimes, in terms of your performance reviews, there isn't really maybe the emphasis on character development, on people development, on the strength of relationships, and how you don't measure those things. What you measure is wins and losses, and unfortunately, that's the mixed messaging that's out there that is problematic. Now, I want to touch back on one of the things that we talked about here. I think it's also a lot of mixed messaging and very difficult for parents My kids played youth sports, been doing this a long time. My wife coaches in youth sports. And I think it's very, very difficult for parents these days because I think parents are spending more money and more time than ever before. I think parents are starting to think that they're quasi-experts in their sports. I think parents, in many cases, have lost the empathy and the ability to communicate with their own children and with coaches in a good, positive way to solve conflicts and problems. And I think one of the things that's happened in youth sports that's been a big problem, two things. One is kids are playing travel sports. So they're spending more time in a car than they are on the actual field of competition. And those rides in a car, sometimes the conversation between parent and child is not always done in the most meaningful way, how to solve problems and how to sometimes back up the coach rather than just entitle your young child that they're right. And that, so I think there's that problem. I think the second part, John, I don't want to skip ahead, but I do think that the stress level of our young kids, from college kids to young kids, because of the social media scoreboard that's out there, is really complicated the relationship between player and coach, parent and coach, and even player and parent. I think that the anxiety, the stress level is through the roof. I think the scoreboard that is so public right now is really messing with the core philosophy of why kids play and why coaches coach. And that can only get resolved through communication and education. And those are two areas that we have to get better at. You know, education of coaches, how to handle these situations, education of parents, how to handle those situations, and the ability, the skill set to communicate and to resolve conflicts in these situations that has to get there. So, sorry if I went off.
No, that's quite all right. And Natasha, I mean, as a player, do you encounter those mixed messages from coaches? You know, on the one hand, hey, we're all about developing the whole person and social and emotional skills. But on the other hand, you got to produce or you may be gone because I've got to win games. And that's sort of the bottom line.
100%. I think at the collegiate level, again, there's so much pressure on coaches for wins and losses. I mean, that's their livelihood. That's how coaches provide for their family. And I think players, for the most part, have that understanding of that. For me, in college, it was always a thing, and I'm personally speaking for myself, of I don't need a coach to instill fear in me or to force their power over me because they need to get these wins to help me produce on the floor. I'm passionate about the game. I love this game. I love the university that I'm at. I love going out on the court every single night and having, whether it was Maryland or St. Joe's across my chest. So for me, it was always, we can have a positive relationship and you still have these expectations of me. So for me, the most part in college, I felt like I wanted a deeper relationship with both of my coaches. But somewhere in that mix of I need wins and losses, this is how I provide for my family, it became only a player and coach relationship and nothing more. And I feel like now that I'm a professional, I'm a little bit older, now I have better relationships with both of my coaches that I played for in college. And the message that I spoke to them about is, if we had this type of relationship when I actually played for you in college, it would have made the biggest difference in how I performed for you on the court. I still tried to perform every single night to the best of my ability. I mean, any sport is, you're going to be imperfect in trying to be perfect in the game. That's just how it's going to be. You're going to have good nights, you're going to have bad nights. But to know that regardless if I have a good night or a bad night, I still have my relationship with my coach and we're still in a good mindset even after I shoot 0 for 11, you know, that's super important for me not to come off of the court scared because I lost or because we won. And especially at the professional level. I mean, I'm playing in a league with, I think the number is 180 some females out of, imagine how many girls in the US play basketball and even overseas. You know, our jobs are extremely cutthroat to get into the league as well. So for me, it's either perform or get cut at the professional level. That's what it is. It's very transactional. But I think here in DC, with my coach, Mike Tebow, he does a phenomenal job of not allowing it to be just that. You know, he's very blunt, he's very upfront and forward, and I appreciate that in the sense of, okay, if I'm not performing to the best of your abilities, let's communicate. Let's talk about it. What can I do better? What do I need from you as a coach to help me get to this point? And what can I do as a player to get to this point? And I think that's extremely important, and it's extremely pivotal in who I am as a player today for the Mystics.
Let's talk a little bit about mental health. And Linda, I want to get your thoughts on this. What do we see at the high school level when it comes to the pressure on some of these athletes and the coach-athlete relationship in terms of having a positive experience?
Well, just as there is at the college level a great, kind of an epidemic of anxiety and depression, and including among athletes, the same it has trickled down to high school, so that especially the competitive ones, the competitive players, or those who have dreams of playing in college or beyond, in particular, are especially prone to, greater anxiety. It's more of a problem with the girls, but most coaches, certainly at my level, we're basically not trained in anything except we are trained on how to deliver first aid and how, we know we're supposed to take you out if you conk your head. But in terms of, positive kind of education, we don't really have any of that, or very little of it. It has to be done outside of, our institution. And we certainly have no training in recognizing mental health problems or how to treat it. And it is a growing problem. And I can say this year on my team, I had a team of 15 girls. 3 had significant anxiety disorders. And I like to think that I know how to, talk to young people and encourage them and help them, but I don't have any training in that. And this is a new thing for me. I mean, racing, I'm a cross-country coach, and racing is inherently anxiety-provoking. Anyone who's ever done it, it's you get very nervous, but this is like taken to another level of, intense anxiety. And I think in moving forward, there will be more attention paid to this at high school among athletes and other kids, because the anxiety and depression, I think most of us know, is a huge problem among young people now. And sports is just one feature of it. But it's all the more important for us coaches to get education in social and emotional learning and how to interact with kids, because it's just getting worse.
Yeah, so we have data that shows youth sports coaches, only 36% of them are trained in effective motivational techniques with children, talking about ages 14 and younger. A lot of these people are volunteer coaches, but then you hear from Linda, even at the high school level, you don't all really get that training. Sasha, at the college level, is there required training, or is it you just sort of have to seek it out on your own?
No, there's no required training, but we do seek it out. I guess we are starting to get a little more training. We have 2 in-house sports psychologists at the University of Maryland now. It's something the coach has been pushing for a long time. But look, I think at the core of this is, if you're a caring coach, and there's a coaching axiom that says young people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I think it's important as a coach that you have to kind of, have these strong relationships, these time alone, where you look a person in the eye, where you watch for stressors. Physical injuries are easy to dissect. Mental injuries are not. And there's a stigma that kids want to hide that they don't want to show that there's something wrong with them. So you have to really delve into it, and you have to find opportunities to really see those things. And you have to look at things that happen, inconsistencies in performance, sadness when the smile is gone, a little more anger that happens. You have to notice these things, and then you have to have the ability to sit down and say, hey, are you okay? What's going on? And sometimes they'll say, yeah, all good, but their body is not saying it's all good. So you have to really kind of delve in. Look, I'm here to help. Talk to me. I'm here to support you. I had a player at the University of Maryland, went through that same conversation, was having all kinds of triggers, and was lying to me, not going to class, and I knew something was wrong. And this young man finally broke down in my office and he asked for help. And we got him help. And then he needed time off. It was 1 semester. It wasn't enough. Then it was another semester. And we took the time and we welcomed him back. And He was a fantastic player, helped us win a national championship. But now the smile is there, and our relationship couldn't be any stronger right now, because I had the courage to really know that something was not right, but I also was going to stick with them and help them. And it's one of the proud moments of coaching. I mean, it really is. We won a national title this year, but my relationship with this young man to help him get through that is just as impactful and meaningful. But I think we have to, as coaches, you don't have to be a sports psychologist. You just have to have an open eye and an open heart that kind of looks at people and says, there's something going on that's deeper here. And I think sometimes you'll get the answers.
Linda, I wanted to ask you also about opportunities to create more transformational coaches. You've written some about how coaches and teachers could learn from each other, and maybe is there a way to integrate coaches more into education? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, and certainly, again, at the high school level, many teachers are coaches and vice versa. But there is a movement away from that also as coaching has become more time-consuming. So fewer teachers want to, coach multiple seasons, so they're bringing in more outside coaches. But, from the research I've done, I know that teachers who do both think they've learned so much from their other job in applying to the classroom, say. So, for example, teachers have learned, one thing that teachers could do that coaches do, and I've heard this a few times, is include more performance. The classroom is like only going to practice and never having a game. And that it would be really useful for teachers to include more performances so that the studies are more geared towards, something. Just the way it would be as if all the people who, all the athletes are only practicing all the time. And coaches really would benefit from learning more about child development and learning more about age. Teachers tend to be more educated in this, and as I said, coaches aren't. And it would be very helpful for us coaches to know, what's appropriate in terms of child development. And also to have plans. Teachers always come to class with plans, and sometimes coaches aren't as, disciplined that way. So there's a lot of overlap between the two, and actually one of the most important, now that I think of it, is that teachers can only sometimes see one side of a kid. And the kid that doesn't bring the homework in, or the kid who's always late. And it's really helpful for those teachers, from what I've heard, who then also coach, and they see, but that kid who's late to class all the time is a great soccer player, is a leader on the field, and it expands their understanding of that kid and makes them more appreciate, the many sides of kids.
One challenge in trying to redefine the role of the coach, as we're talking about here, I think, is that it's much easier to measure the transactional coach, right? You can look at wins and losses. You can look at how many pro players or college scholarship offers you've produced. You can look at the actual athletic performance, has it improved? So how do we think through about how to measure the transformational coach who's trying to identify and positively change the whole person? Any thoughts on that? Because that's more challenging, I think, to get to.
Well, to measure, it's more challenging. Sometimes you just need time. And you see a body of work, and you see where some of your players have gone on and succeeded in other areas, whether it's in the community or in their professions, and the impact you have in their life. It is very hard to measure. But I think there's no question that the goal of every coach should be to be a transformational coach, to help transform their lives in a better way because of your influence into their life. I think that has to be very, very clear that that's the number one goal of any coach. And I think it's incumbent upon all coaches to continue to develop themselves. When I first started to coach, I was just graduating college. I picked a 6-credit class on the sociological and psychological aspects of coaching college athletes. I knew I wanted to be a college coach. So I learned that, I still read biographies of every coach, business executive. Anytime I see a successful person, I want to see what they're doing. So, we're all thieves coaches. We steal ideas, John Wooden's pyramid, I stole that, and we adapted it, but it's a good thing. There's a humility and a respect to continue to learn and evolve, and that's being a good role model for the people that you coach to learn those things. I think at the same time, coaches aren't perfect. I think it's okay for coaches to make sure their athletes know they're not perfect, that they're going to make mistakes. Because you make mistakes all the time. I make mistakes all the time. Sometimes I yell too much. I'm harsh. I make tactical mistakes. I don't play kid long enough. And so then how do you handle that as a coach? Well, you have to have the skill set to, sometimes you just apologize. Sometimes you communicate and you explain and you humanize yourself, and it's okay, because that's what we want our kids to understand. That, this perfection thing is a noble thing to look at, but hey, I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. It's okay. Like we got to find a way to sort of, bring some of that, take some of this air out of the balloon that sometimes coaches have and athletes have, and kind of just, make sure that you're evolving, that you're having fun, that you're enjoying what you're doing. I've never gone into a locker room not excited to be there, ever, not once, not in entire my career, because I love what I do. And I want to make sure that's exactly how my players come to the locker room.
Could I just add one thing to that?
okay.
One thing I tell my team, whenever we have a bad, whatever, it doesn't happen too often, but when they have a bad race, and it's a big race, say, I bring them together and I say, don't ever let a coach tell you that, what did you do wrong? Let's figure out what you did wrong. Because if we're in this together, I made mistakes too. Like your not performing was at least something I had a role in that. So don't ever let a coach tell you, you didn't do this, why did you do that wrong? It's a joint thing. We are in this together, so I bear some responsibility. Maybe I didn't do, let's think about maybe we need to do more hills, maybe we need to do more weights. But it is, you're in it together, and I think it's like your point, Sasha, that they need to know that you're human and you're fallible and you make mistakes.
Well, we have time for a few questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll bring a microphone around to you. And just please be brief so we can try to get as many people as we can. We have a question over here.
Just stand up
Yeah, we got a microphone coming so people on the live stream can hear you as well.
John, I loved your first question, and you guys were great. What coach stands out the most? My father, football coach of 35 years, was mine. I wanted to be a coach forever, and I was. 60-plus teams, and it's led me to what I do now. My question for all of you is, okay, you had the coaches that you didn't want to model. What did you learn from them?
Anyone want to take a stab at that?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Natasha.
So your question was the coaches that necessarily didn't affect us in a great way. How did we learn from them? Correct. Okay. Yeah. So obviously, no coach is perfect. Again, like all of us have said up here, no coach is perfect. They're all human. They're going to make mistakes. I think for me, I'm not at the coaching point yet, but from a player standpoint, I've learned to take those situations that I've had with those coaches, those bad situations that haven't turned out in my favor, and I've learned how to reassess and then how to now handle that same situation with a different coach. Okay, maybe my approach to this coach is a little bit different. And also going into coaching, I know how I want to be with my players moving forward. I would love to get into college coaching sometime soon. And for me, I've always said I want to do it the right way. I want to be able to get wins, but still do it the right way with developing my players and being there for them and putting in time and putting in that relationship, because I believe that the ages of 18 to 23 are super fragile, especially in men and women, and with the pressures of collegiate, not only academics, but sports as well. So for me, moving forward as a coach, I would hope I'm not going to be perfect. I mean, at times I'm going to be terrible, but being able to admit my faults, being able to use what I learned through my college career and apply it to now me.
Well,
Yeah. Go ahead, Linda.
Well, I guess what I learned from my bad coaches is that I wanted them to see me. I didn't want to be part of a mass of humanity out there. I wanted them to see me. And that's what I try to do as a coach, like to be sure that I see each individual and can meet them on their terms. Because if you're just a anonymous person, it's not motivating, and you don't want to be there necessarily.
Yeah, I would say, I've had several very bad coaches, and it's awesome because you just simply say, I don't want to be viewed like that by my players ever, and it's a powerful way. It's a powerful thing. Say, look, sometimes you learn as much how to not to do things as you do how to do things, and I think it's another opportunity for growth. Say, look, I hope my players never feel that way about me. And then you work hard to make sure that they don't.
Do we have any questions? One right over here.
Thanks for a really engaging conversation. This is really, really important. I also played college tennis and I've coached, and I agree with everything that you were talking about. Linda, you mentioned child development, and even our educators, teachers in schools aren't getting enough in child development. On average, they're getting one class during their teacher training. But this is also very apropos for coaches, and I would just love you to talk a bit about the concept of this child development kind of instruction manual for kids, and tied into enhanced accreditation standards, or for the ability for a coach to be a trusted, safe adult who spends time with our children, having some level of training, the feasibility of it, and particularly with rec, which there are lots of volunteer parents who just have a particular amount of time, maybe not as much background in the sport. But if you could just talk about the concept of education and awareness tied to standards for coaches.
I wish there were an easy answer. I can tell you that I am an education writer as well as a coach, and in the education world, there's almost nothing about sports and coaching. It's considered kind of an extra thing. And I think it would be really helpful if coaches were included in that world, so that some of the, as limited as it is, some of the child development knowledge could be, trickled down into the coaching. At younger levels, I don't know what the answer is, because there's so much demand for coaches. It's hard to get them to coach the little various teams. So it's hard then to say, oh, and by the way, you need to take this class on what's appropriate for an 8-year-old. I do think there has to be some kind of change that way, whether it's, maybe not offering as many teams, maybe saying, well, if we can't get coaches who will do this, then we just won't have the teams. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. But there's no easy answer.
Yeah, I think there should be a minimum level of certification, for sure. There's no question on mine. I know U.S. Soccer and United Soccer coaches do a lot of state licensing, parent licensing. We do background checks now with everyone, but we don't do enough preparation how to actually deal with young people. Much of it is just common sense, but I do think there should be a minimum level, even with the idea of mental health, is how do you notice symptoms and signs, those types of things. I still think the number one goal of any coach should be to have their players fall in love with the game, to be excited to go to practice. Your number one goal should be, I want to make sure my kids want to come to practice the next practice. And I think that's a simple goal, enthusiasm. We talked about impactful coaches. My wife was a World Cup winner, a Hall of Famer. She talks about Anson Dorrance, her coach at Carolina, being a great coach. But she also talks about her U10 coach, a guy named Denny Burnham. We still know his name because he made it fun. He made it fun. He didn't have a clue about soccer. Sorry, Denny. But he made it fun. The kids couldn't wait to go to practice, and I think it's some of this is common sense stuff. But we do need to have a certification program run either through the clubs, through the states, through the communities, that beyond the background check, these are some of the do's and don'ts with 8-year-old kids or 10-year-old kids. Should be no trophies, at this young ages. Yeah, should be no trophies. Get rid of trophies. I've run camps for 30 years. I haven't given out one trophy. We give out balls and shoes and different things that they can use, not trophies that they hang for nothing. I think we have to get away from this trophy thing and the standings that U8. Who gives a about standings at U8 and U10? You know, we have kids being ranked, basketball players and soccer players ranked as the best 10-year-old in the country. Really? We as a society have to stop that. We can't do that. You know, we can't create a bigger scoreboard up there than the kids already have on their social media platform. So I think we have some serious conversations that we have to continue.
Got time for one more question? I'll go right here.
Hi, thank you for your words today. Linda, I was really interested in your research that you've done and the background that you have in education. I work a lot in the parent engagement field for youth sports, and it's really clear all of the research about parent engagement and the benefits that we have to our schools when we engage parents. We're not really seeing that in sports. You even went as far as to say, you know, parents are putting so much stress on kids and coaches, but what path do you see and what opportunities do you see for actual parent engagement really being a change agent to the issues that we're seeing in youth sports?
Parent engagement, well, I mean, there is a lot of parent involvement. You know, sometimes there's too much parent involvement. What do you mean by that, by parent engagement?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I get that question a lot because it's kind of flipping the script. So instead of pushing parents away, which we have historically done in youth sports, saying, no, I'm the coach, you know, I'm going to be over on this side of the field, you're the parent, you're on that side of the field, actually connecting with parents, telling them what we're doing, how we're impacting their kids developmentally, socially, the different lessons that are happening, instead of it all being about the results. If we don't connect with parents, give them that education and information, then it just becomes about the results.
And it becomes adversarial. And it doesn't have to be adversarial. I mean, I think one way to do that is to have, you know, there's simple things like have meetings before, you know, practices start, you know, a big team meeting and be very clear about what it is you're trying to do with the team. You know, provided that the coach does have some of these tools, you know, social and emotional tools, and has bigger goals than just, you know, winning the, you know, 10 and under soccer tournament. That if they can, communication is so important, you know, as a coach, particularly with the greater, you know, friction. I think there's got to be a lot of communication. So I think starting with the preseason meeting and encouraging open lines of communication. I think that's how you kind of try to change the story about this season. Improving communication as much as possible.
Great.
And having that preseason meeting.
Well, listen, we could keep talking about this for a while, but I know we have other discussions here as well. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much for our panel. Please give a nice round of applause for them. Thank you very much. Great. And I'd like to now introduce our next speaker. Susan Crown is chairman and founder of the Susan Crown Exchange. Susan is a champion of ensuring equitable access to high-quality opportunities, including youth sports for all young people. We're grateful to Susan for her support of our project, Coaching Social and Emotional Skills in Youth Sports, which produced the brief we are releasing today. Please welcome to the podium, Susan Crown.
I promise the donor has the smallest part of the program. We are so pleased to be with you launching this important effort. In a world where there are increasingly more divisions every day, there are few things that unite us, and sports is definitely one of them. At SCE, we're focused on a single question, and that is, how do we best prepare the rising generation to thrive in a rapidly changing world? 5 years ago, we launched a nationwide initiative in social and emotional learning, studying how the best youth organizations cultivate skills like resilience and grit and empathy and problem solving and teamwork, and how to find the best organizations supporting these capacities. Coaches touch the lives of millions of kids every single day. That means they have the power to lift up and teach and learn and reinforce and support and model what it really takes to navigate life. And we know that a coach can offer the most influential relationship in a kid's life, often kids without much adult connection. The hallmark of a high quality sports experience is often an athlete's relationship with his or her coach. However, the percentage of adults trained in fostering key social and emotional skills is stubbornly low, even as the value of having a trained coach has generally grown in our culture. I'm supposed to comment on my coaching experience. It falls in the latter half of that. I was coached by a Wimbledon champ. He used to put me at the net, trying to see if he could form nice round bruises in unprotected areas. Very successful. Could he have, did he influence my life? You betcha. Could he have influenced it in a better way had he known what motivated and moved me? Absolutely. Recent surveys show, as Sasha noted, that 4 in 10 coaches are being trained in areas like CPR and effective motivational techniques and safety. 4 in 10. This is what we call white space. There are barriers to training the nation's 6.5 million youth coaches. Professional sports are just a part of that, but most sports are outside of that professional realm. Removing barriers is a great opportunity, and that's why we particularly appreciate this partnership with the Sports and Society program at Aspen Institute. So today, as we launch Calls for Coaches, an action plan and roadmap for coaches wishing to create environments which intentionally build life skills, we're very, very excited. We want to help define what winning really means. Feels great. I mean, we all know having the higher score at the end of a game, but winning also means being proud of how you handled yourself, who you are, what kind of effort you put in, how you treated your teammates, how you treated your opponents. Competitive environments exist everywhere in life. We all win, we all lose. Should the definition of coaching and winning be broadened just a little bit, we can make winning into we either win or we learn. A great coach teaches that. So this work needs to be actionable, not just theory, and it must provide evidence base for the effective strategies. We really hope that the research this incredible team has put together and the Calls for Coaches report strikes you as relevant and useful, and that you'll figure out a way to integrate it into your own practices. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Susan, and thank you all for being here. We're going to have a little quick set change to get ready for the next panel, but I'm Jennifer Brown-Lerner and with the National Commission on Social, Emotional, and Academic Development, and I'm joined by Marty Fox from the Sports and Society program here. And we are going to take a minute to present the Calls for Coaches so you can actually understand what the great brief that you have on your chair is all about. So I'm just going to give a really brief overview of our project and some of the foundations for what we're talking about, and then turn it over to Marty to do the hard work of sharing all the calls. So we started this project by really looking at the academic literature from a variety of different fields, because there isn't yet a field called Developing Social Emotional Skills in Youth Sports. And so with help of our colleagues at the EASL Lab at Harvard Graduate School of Education, we produced a white paper that summarized the research that's available, not just from social emotional learning and character development, but from sports psychology, from positive youth development, from sports-based youth development, from out-of-school time. And this became the basis for our discussions with our variety of strategic advisors and partners. Those folks included not only the academics who helped us summarize all the literature, but coaches, coach educators, technical assistance providers, and athletes themselves, including some youth athletes. With all of their help, we're able to develop a foundational understanding of the skills that matter. And I'm just going to take 30 seconds to talk about this great diagram that is the foundational skills that matter. So we believe that the skills fall into 3 categories. These categories include cognitive regulation, the basic skills to direct behavior towards goals, like working memory or attention control. And I'm naming skills, but recognize there are a lot of other skills that fall into that category. I'm just giving you some illustrative examples. The next category is emotional competencies, recognize and regulating your own emotions, sympathy, empathy, and even your coping skills. And the final category deals with social and interpersonal skills, understanding and appropriately reacting to the behavior of others. Skill development is influenced by the both white ring and the blue outer ring, which is individuals, their beliefs, and the environment that they operate in. These are all grounded in our understanding of positive youth development and are grounded in relationships. No learning happens without the relationship between at least 2 people, ideally a coach and an athlete, but we have to acknowledge that it's also going on between coaches and athletes and athletes. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Marty to talk about the calls.
The result of all these conversations in this work are 7 strategies for coaches to integrate into their practices. These calls represent best practices that coaches can use to develop, model, and foster their young athletes' holistic development. The first call is inspired by the first play of Project Play to ask kids what they want. A defining feature of education, including in youth sports, is to build positive adult-youth relationships. So our first call is to know every athlete's story. If a coach takes the time to understand why each and every youth athlete has made the decision to play sports, they'll have a better appreciation for that athlete's goals and skills. As Linda just said, I wanted my coach to see me. Skills develop best in a safe, supportive, and positive environment. That's why our second call is to establish a supportive team culture. Coaches should work to provide the safety, security, and support needed for learning by being clear, consistent, encouraging, and respectful with athletes. In addition to these adult-led actions, coaches should create opportunities for athletes to use their voice, develop their own leadership skills, and build the camaraderie that makes a group of individuals into a team. A key part of this supportive culture is encouraging kids to do their personal best. When you celebrate effort, not merely wins and losses, but the actual process of skill development, you acknowledge that mistakes are a part of learning and give kids the confidence to try something new in the name of getting better. The fourth call is the balancing point, focusing on the skills that matter. Social and emotional skill building doesn't just happen as the side effect of a sports experience. Coaches should identify the specific skills they're looking to develop and communicate those skills clearly with athletes and with parents. Like Linda said, engaging the parents at the start of the season in a team meeting, communicating the goals for the team. Reinforcing all types of skills, physical skills as well as social and emotional skills, creates routines and leads to a higher quality environment for athletes and for coaches. As each coach builds a relationship with an athlete, the athlete will look to the coach as a role model. Coaches should model the skills they hope to see in their athletes and clearly communicate with parents the importance of this positive behavior. It's important for a coach to engage in self-reflection about their own social and emotional well-being, recognizing that a coach is always learning and developing along with their athletes. Like Sasha said, no coach is perfect. And since no coach is perfect, be coachable. Recognize the fundamental skills for how people learn, kids and adults, and actively seek out and participate in professional development to grow your coaching skills. In addition to learning from other adults, coaches should be learning from their athletes, collecting feedback throughout the season, and incorporating it into practices. A coach is a key member of a young athlete's web of support, so our final call is to join forces with parents, teachers, and other community organizations to mutually reinforce social and emotional skill development. Regularly communicate with families to share team expectations and values. Communicate with other coaches to share best practices for coaching. Through this communication, you can become a leader in the conversation of your community about what good coaching looks like, what expectations should be for parents and athletes, and how to create a healthy and positive sports experience for all kids. We recognize that we've covered a lot of ground in these 7 calls, so you'll see the resources to learn more about social and emotional skill development. The resource spotlights recognize leaders in this space, including many members of our strategic advisory group, and many of you here in the audience today. The practice spotlights are compiled onto the back cover into a checklist that you can carefully tear off, photocopy, laminate, attach to your clipboard, share with your colleagues, and consult every season, practice, or game. To read the white paper or download PDFs of this report, the white paper Jennifer mentioned, or our checklist, you can visit our website at as.pn/callsforcoaches. Now, this time I would like to welcome up Tom Ferry, and I very much hope our guest, Arnie Duncan. So Tom, and we can have Arnie come in, and we will get the stage set for our keynote conversation. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Marty. Can y'all hear me? We good? All right, I think Arnie's coming in a moment here. Terrific conversation so far. Thank you. Look at this huge room. This shows the interest in this topic. Again, 6.5 million coaches in this country, and we're hoping that this rock being thrown into the pond creates a ripple that extends well beyond this room and well beyond this day. And Arnie, why don't you come up here and join me here? You are the featured guest for this particular session. Yes, I'd like to welcome up Arnie. Good to see you. Arnie has been involved with our program really for many years, going back to the Aspen Ideas Festival in 2011, 2012 or so we've had a conversation going over time. So when we were going to introduce this report, we thought of him immediately given his background. So, many people know Arnie's background already. Former U.S. Secretary of Education, Superintendent of the Chicago Public Schools, has gone back into Chicago and is working with a nonprofit that works with young men to get them integrated into society and the workforce. And Arnie is a former Harvard University basketball player and played professional basketball in, was it Australia or Tasmania or the Tasmanian Professional Basketball League?
Tasmania's in Australia.
So anyway, we'll welcome Arnie. Thank you for being with us. Yeah,
fun.
absolutely. So your connection here, you spend so much of your time thinking about schools in our society and the adults that work with kids in those settings. How do you see the role of coaches, whether it be in school-based settings or maybe more to the point in after-school settings? What role do they play in developing the social and emotional lives? How do these two sets of adults interact and create the whole child?
So students have a whole array of adults around them. They have 7, 8, 9 teachers, they have principals, they have social workers, they have whatever. But no one is more important than that coach. And the amount of hours that young people are spending with a coach is wildly disproportionate than what they're spending with a biology teacher or a social studies teacher, whatever it might be, or with a counselor. And so, Tom, the swing there in terms of either positive impact or negative impact, and we know you have the whole continuum and the whole spectrum, is huge. But coaches have this unique opportunity to be an extraordinary mentor and to shape the lives of young boys and girls in ways that very few other adults can, because they're that important. Mm-hmm. And I'll speak for myself. I liked going to school. I liked going to biology class, but I loved playing basketball, and that was sort of really why I went to school. And that coach is a big deal.
Mm-hmm. In terms of developing your own social and emotional skills over time, any moments or maybe any coaches who were particularly influential in creating the Arnie Duncan we know today?
I was fortunate to have some good coaches, but the honest answer, Tom, is that the biggest influences on me, or influences on me, were the older guys I grew up playing with on the street. And those were hugely important mentors. Those were guys I learned to read character by them. I learned who to trust and not to trust. I always say, for me, it was basketball. We all have different interests, different passions, but I always say you can't fake who you are on the court. You can't hide your character. It's like basketball reveals exactly who you are at your core. You can try and fake it, but it doesn't work. And I was blessed to have a series of just amazing, amazing mentors. One of them I'll mention, who you also know, is the guy. I went to a K-12 school, which is a little bit unusual, and the guy who was the star of the high school team when I was in middle school was a guy named John Rogers. He was my Michael Jordan, and I sort of followed him around like a puppy dog. And that was, I'm 54 now. That was probably when I was 12. He's been my best friend for 42 years. We still talk every week. There's not a life decision I've made without his ideas and his influence. And the connection came through basketball. That was a tie.
So drill down a little bit deeper on that, though. By following him around, what particular traits, lessons he either imparted orally or by just watching him? Was it resilience? Was it emotional regulation? Yeah. Was it planning? What are the specific skills you picked up from watching him?
A couple things, and that's the right question. One was just how hard he played, and he was a good player. I wouldn't say he was he wasn't an NBA player. Lucky enough to be captain of his college team, but he just played so hard all the time. But the interesting thing for me, Tom, was not that's the basketball court. Where I really learned the most from him was off the court, and just watching how he treated people. And he treated everybody the same, and he's had a very successful business career. But whether it's the CEO or the President of the United States, or he loves to go to McDonald's, whether it's the homeless guy at McDonald's, or a cab driver, he treats everybody the same. And just watching how he did that was hugely impactful for me.
Just modeling, which is one of the calls for coaches, which is be a good role model.
Well, and I think the biggest thing for me, I was thinking, what are the lessons? We can talk about all the technical skills or sport specific skills. If you can teach kids to be good teammates, if you could teach them to be resilient, it's like game over. It's done. And I just think of sports as arguably the most important training ground for future leaders. And for me, the basketball court was always the most important classroom I had, where I learned the most lessons. And so the opportunity here is massive. And again, so many of us were fortunate to have good role models, good mentors, good coaches who taught us how to lead. But that is too often not the case.
You had an ambitious agenda when you were running the Department of Education here. Very clear what you wanted to do with education in this country. Not everybody was on board with it. At the same time, Republicans had respect for you. They liked working with Arnie. They knew they could get around the table with you. I wonder how much of that had to do with your sport background, right? Just divergent points of view, and we're all competing. And so that's sort of one question. Sort of the follow-on to that is as well, how would our political culture in this country be different if everyone was grounded in a quality sport experience when they're younger, where they had to learn these type of skills and traits?
Well, I'm always a little too honest. You may not have me back, but I'll just say the previous president I worked for was an athlete and a teammate, and the current president isn't an athlete. It was never a teammate. And being a teammate is a really, really powerful experience. And there were times when I was the star of the team, and there were times when I was literally the water boy on the team. And you have an important role to play all the way through. And so for me, divergent points of view, that's easy. It's understanding the value that everyone brings to what you're trying to get done, and how important it is to try and get the best from everybody. And so can you draw those links, back to sports? There's a direct link, absolutely, no question.
And what about like playing within the rules, right? I mean, this is one of the things that sports teach you: compete hard, really, really hard. But at the end of the day, but the game, there is no game unless people recognize there's a rule of law, or in this case,
Yeah.
the rules of a game or otherwise. But how does sport impact our ability to operate within a political culture, effectively in that sense?
I'll say we had a saying, it was sort of twofold, is don't cheat the game.
Mm-hmm.
And like the game is so special and has done so much for so many of us. So for us, that had a twofold meaning. It was like, if you're not working hard, you're cheating the game. So if you're not really trying to get better, you're cheating the game. Or if you're trying to cheat, you're cheating the game. If we're playing out in the streets and you're making bad calls or phony fouls or whatever. So it does teach you, yes, to compete and to compete fiercely. And again, I go back to resiliency and having our kids. How do you handle pressure? How do you handle things when things are tough? Do you point fingers? Do you quit? Do you blame others? Or do you sort of try and rally your team and try and figure out a way to get out of a tough situation? So those skills are, again, there's no better. It's hard to teach that in biology. It's hard to teach that in algebra. It's the perfect place to teach that, on the soccer field or the basketball court or the football field or whatever it might be.
Because classrooms are environments where individuals are pursuing a grade that is individual. Yeah, they create these little group projects, right?
Yeah.
And one kid does all the work. No, I mean, but I mean, right? I mean, so classrooms are sort of limited in their ability to teach.
You can do it there, and great teachers do it all the time.
Right.
It is much more natural, much more organic, authentic, maybe, to do it through sport.
Mm-hmm.
Through sport, it's it's the perfect practice field for those skills.
So you read the calls for coaches report. None of it's rocket science, right? Right, which is okay. I mean, that's good. It's meant to kind of put in one place the stuff that makes sense, based as best as possible in the evidence and best practice that's out there. So when you read this report, how do you see it being useful in improving the culture of youth coaching in this country and the skills that kids derive from that experience?
Well, it's funny. I go back to my first experience with the Aspen Institute, which was being a Henry Crown Fellow years and years ago. And the focus there was around values-based leadership. And I think all you're trying to do, which again, they're easy to articulate, is much harder to try and live them, to practice them day to day. And I think, Tom, what you and your team have done, and done it really, really effectively, is just talk about what are our values here? Like what's important? What are we trying to accomplish here? And if we can, and let me, it's particularly on youth coaches, and it's complicated because I have a lot, turn off the lights, so we all have a nap here. Because I coach, and I've coached my son's team for a couple of years. I'm also very critical of so much of what I see, so I'm both in it and critical. But if in youth sport, we as parents could hold our coaches more accountable for the lessons they're imparting on our children, and not just handing them over to whatever, that for me is what has to change. Is what are we as parents asking for? And if your playbook, if your series of values, if parents are handing that to coaches and having those conversations, it was interesting. My kids basically grew up here in Chicago for 7 years. We moved back to, grew up in DC here, moved back to Chicago. Son wanted to keep playing, and I talked to a bunch of my friends, and there are a couple teams, and my friends say, like, that's a great program, but your kid can't play for that coach. Like, that's not the right situation for your kid or any kid. And yet, lots of kids are in those situations. Mm-hmm. And it just was, for me, again, a very personal, stark reminder that people with reputations, people with success, people with, traveling all the circuits, may not or are not teaching the kind of values that you and I might think are important.
You have how many kids? Two
Two
kids,
daughter,
and
son.
They play sports?
My son plays more than my daughter, yeah.
And your son's about how old now?
He's a freshman, she's a junior in high school.
And what sports?
Basketball.
Basketball. And so when you look at the culture of youth sports today, what in youth coaching, what do you see?
This is a bit of a tough statement, and again, my lens is a little bit narrow. You have a much broader lens than my lens is primarily youth basketball, so that's, again, maybe too specific. It feels a little lost to me. It feels a little lost.
Why?
I think you have too many folks who are in it for reasons other than the things that we've talked about, other than teaching leadership, other than teaching resilience. There are other motivations that have less to do with the idea of, am I training the next generation of leaders for our country and using the player-coach relationship, using the sport as a vehicle to do that.
Hmm. So what are the organizations that need to mobilize and change that environment, right? Are we talking about the NCAA, which you've had conversations with them about in terms of training their coaches at that level?
Yeah, well, that's important, and we've worked on that, and I'm proud to co-chair the Knight Commission that looks at that. But I'll go back to what I said before, Tom. I really think so. NCAA, professional leagues can all have a role. I really put it back on us as parents. Like, these are our kids, and these are our 5-year-olds, our 8-year-olds, our babies. And if we were a little clearer, and again, maybe this is where your playbook, your handbook can be pretty helpful. If we were clearer about who we're going to entrust for 10, 15, 20, 30 hours a week to be in charge of our kids' development, again, way more time per day, per week, per year than any teacher, anyone else. If we were a little bit more discerning and a little bit clearer about what we're asking for, that for me needs to be the biggest driver.
Mm-hmm. Because the thing about parents is they all love their kids, right? I mean, even the maniac parents out there we see on youth sidelines, they still love their kids, but they're kind of lost, aren't they? I mean, they don't know what to advocate for exactly, or what to ask programs for, or then how to hold these programs accountable or otherwise. See, what you're saying is that, first of all, they need to know what good looks like, right?
Yeah.
And then they need to demand it of those programs.
You need to ask it, you need to develop it, you need to teach it, you need to nurture it, and we're all trying to get better, and we're all making mistakes every single day, but you got to be clear, what's your trajectory? What path are you trying to go down? And how do parents and coaches together, go down that path, and also, again, to foster the growth and the leadership and the development and the grit and the resiliency of kids.
Mm-hmm. So what role can schools play in fostering this environment that you're talking about, right? These are educationally based or, activity, but we actually don't require coaches to be trained in very much these days. Yeah. It's often not teachers at the school, it's the local real estate guy or whoever who might know a particular sport, the skills and the tactics. What would you like to see happen with high school coaching to setting? Is it a matter of mandating a higher level of training? Is it a matter of setting up criteria that is developmentally based as opposed to wins and losses? And how do you mechanically make this thing work?
So we can talk about the mechanics. I think for me the larger challenge is a cultural one. And in education, we love to compartmentalize. We love to silo. Mm-hmm. And I would argue, so often and again, this is a bit broad statement, so it's not always true, and there's some fantastic counterexamples, but often the educators educating people focus there, and whatever the coach is doing is sort of off to the side, and it's just not so important, not so relevant. And again, I think I can make a pretty compelling case that maybe the most important educators in a high school, seeing you brought that up, are actually the athletic coaches. Mm-hmm. They may have the biggest influence on kids' lives of any of the hundreds of adults in a high school. I know their impact is disproportionately high and maybe the highest. Mm-hmm. And so the question as a principal, as a school board, as a parent, is if I'm taking an asset that's that important, that's that critical, what am I doing to integrate them into the school day? What am I doing to teach them about social and emotional learning? How am I holding them accountable? But again, how am I training them to use that opportunity to have the goal being, yes, less wins and losses, and more, are these our communities, our city, our suburb, our state, our nation? Am I training our nation's future leaders every single day? Mm-hmm. That's my mission.
Mm-hmm. How much of the problem is structural, right? So, like, my kid goes to a school of 3,300 kids. There's one team. A lot of kids try out. Yeah. Very few make it. Yeah. Very quickly it becomes an elite exercise and focused on W's and L's. Yeah. How do you, is there something structurally that needs to change in these environments? Do we need to go back to intramurals? Do we need to go back to environments that basically say, no, every kid has a right, and we have to play sports, and we need that child to develop through sports. So we're going to create the structures that are going to change the incentives and.
Yeah. So I think it goes back to values of, do we think being part of a team is a valuable part of healthy adolescent or child development? If the answer is yes, then you need more than one team of 12 for 3,300 kids. And so you have two options of different ways to do it. One is a huge intramural play, which is fantastic. The second would be, as other countries do, more of a club sport, situation where it sort of de-emphasizes the school piece of that. And there are different answers, probably 5 other answers I'm not thinking about. But the fundamental question, Tom, is, do we think, and for me, it doesn't have to be sports, maybe it's the orchestra, maybe it's the Bay team, maybe it's Model UN, but it's being part of a team, being in the drama. And those kinds of things that are seen as extracurricular, I just think are absolutely critical, vital. And so the different way of thinking about it would be, Tom, if we had those 3,300 kids at a big high school, that's a reality. What's the mechanism to figure out that every single one of those young people who wants it has a chance to be part of a quality team, or 2, or 3? And who's going to case manage that? Who's going to make sure those opportunities exist? Who's going to instill the discipline, the culture, that these are not extra, these are not whatever. This is absolutely critical to healthy development.
And finally, before we bring up the kids here, stepping outside of the school-based environment, let's talk about the after-school environment, or maybe both as well. You work in Chicago with a population of kids that you're trying to make sure they get on in society. How important, social and emotional skills are important for every kid in the society to have. When you look at the population that you're working with right now, where do you see the need or the particular need, and where do you see the challenge or the particular challenge?
Yeah, and I'll be very honest. So to be very clear, I'm working to reduce gun violence in Chicago. So I'm working with 17 to 24-year-old young men on the south and west side who are doing the shooting or being shot or both. And it's the same profile. It's often the same person. It's not that they lacked role models growing up, as they lacked role models that exist in rooms like this. And their role models were the guys on the street, were the leaders who, when mom was absent and dad was gone, all of us in very comfortable rooms like this, we were not present. And they picked a mentor and role model who was available. I was lucky to go to a great school and have John Rogers as my role model. They're not lucky to have that, and their role models are the guys on the corner. And those guys, when all of us aren't there, those guys take them in and provide a surrogate family and love and support and money when we are absent. So what they desperately missed was not role models. They missed role models with a different set of opportunities and values and life experiences. And probably the most important thing we're doing now is providing them with life coaches, guys who are formerly from the street, who have turned their lives around, who are, they're coaches. They are coaching them, not on sports skills, they're coaching them on life. That's the most important thing we're doing by far.
And what role do you see, or where do you see opportunity with youth sports minimizing, or quality youth coaching, this type of coaching?
It's a game changer. And when you have a chance to be part of a team, when you have a chance to have a coach who can guide you through the tough times and instill these values, not so much through their words, but through their actions, through their leadership, you get a very different sense of what's possible, of what your potential is, of what your future is. And we know sports can open up doors that just don't exist otherwise, and can provide a set of life experiences that are, amazing. Again, I came from a very, privileged 2-parent family, home, but I went to Europe because of basketball. I went to Egypt because of basketball. I went to Australia because it just opened my world in ways that
you met your wife through
basketball. Met my wife through basketball. Best friends, life are from basketball. So much of my life has literally been shaped by those relationships, And again, I came from a great family. I came from a middle-class family where education was valued. For those kids that are coming from single-parent families or often from no-parent families, think how much more important those opportunities are for them than they were for me.
Well, as great as it is to talk with Arnie, the only thing more fun would be to talk with kids.
No, I'm the warm-up act. Let's get the
You're
pros
the
up
warm-up
here.
guy. So let's bring up Alice and Rajan and Jency. We're going to add a few chairs here, and Arnie, maybe you can go on the back end there.
Try to slide down.
I want you on the
Go ahead. Yeah. What's going on? How you doing? Good to see you. What's going on? How you doing? Good to see you. What's going
Hey
on?
guys,
Good to see you.
how are you? Yeah. You guys having fun?
Yes.
This isn't a bunch of boring adult talk?
Tell the
No?
truth. Tell the truth.
No? Okay, all right. Well, listen, we're so glad you're here. It's really terrific because, you know, in our program with Project Play, rule number one, strategy number one, play number one is ask kids what they want. We really think it's important to hear from you guys when we talk about designing the sport experiences of kids. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. And so we're going to ask you a few questions. And I just want you to talk naturally. There's no right or wrong answer to any of this stuff, okay? We just want to know how you feel and what you think of. So first of all, why don't we just introduce yourself real quickly, give your name, where you live, and maybe what sports you play.
Okay, my name is Jency. I live in DC, and I play the sport soccer.
Okay, my name is Alice. I live in DC. I play soccer, basketball, and baseball.
Hi, my name is Rajan Foster, and I play for Flagstar with Coach Mo.
Okay, there you go. Go coach.
Yeah.
All right, is he good?
Yes, very good.
He doesn't scream too much?
No.
No.
Maybe an excitement.
An excitement. That's the kind of coach we like. That's good. Terrific. All right, so tell me real quickly, and Arnie, you and I can go back and forth.
Yeah.
I just want to kind of roll through this first set of questions. Tell me why you play sports and what kind of coach you want to have in the course of playing. Why don't we start?
I play sports for three main reasons. First of all, it's just what everybody would say. It's just to have fun. I love the game of football, and I also play basketball and soccer, and I just enjoy it so much. So that's number one. Number two is just it's a great time to hang out with friends. I have a lot of friends on my team, which is a good privilege, and it's just a time to hang out with them where otherwise I wouldn't be, and it just makes me have so much more fun. And three is to compete. I am a very competitive person, and when I'm playing, it just makes me feel so much better because I can exercise that competitive nature.
Yeah, you get to test yourself a little bit,
Exactly.
right? Learn about yourself as well. Alice, what about you?
I think I'm kind of the same as him, but I just do it to like build my friendships with friends and just like it's a time to hang out with them, just talk with them about stuff, not necessarily school, like, oh, what's on this next test. And I also think it's just like it builds like my communication, teamwork, leadership skills. I think that's a big thing. Like as I get older, I'm gonna have to have those skills, and sports is a good opportunity for you to build those.
Mm-hmm. Great. Jency?
So I play soccer because as growing up, I was like the second only female in the house, and I needed ways to connect with my brother, with my cousins, with my dad. And growing up, I would watch soccer games with them. And once I got the opportunity in elementary school, when DC Scores came, I was like, yes, this is a sport I want to play. And as I grew older, I realized how much I loved the sport and how much I got off it and how many opportunities I learned. It's just like it became a major part of my life, and that's why I started playing.
DC Scores is a terrific organization, right?
It
It's
really
soccer
is.
plus poetry.
Yes.
That's pretty neat, huh? Yeah, absolutely. And your coach, what do you follow up on that a little bit? What do you want out of a coach?
A coach, well, it's a perfect example. He or she has to be the role model of the team. Like, if you have someone that's not dedicated to the team, the rest of the team isn't going to be focused on the game and having fun. So a coach has to motivate you, has to always be there outside of school, in school, outside of the team, in the team. Whether it's a good day, a bad day, they have to have a smile on their face. Whatever it is, just like always be there for you.
I think a coach, it's just important that like they're not going to be, if like you make an error, they're not going to say, oh, it's okay. I mean, that is important, but they're also going to say what you did wrong and like how you can fix that in the future. And they're not just going to be super nice and, you know, like all happy and everything. Like they should be that, but they should also have a part of them that's going to like teach them, that's going to teach you stuff. And I think like what I like in a coach is a coach that goes step by step. Like when you're learning a new thing, they don't just show you one time and expect you to get it right away. They give you a good foundation and they explain to you step by step what to do, and if you're doing something wrong, how you can fix that. And I think that's great.
I agree totally with Alice, and I think that in an earlier segment they were talking about how you don't want the coach to think of you as like a single unit in this mass of people, that you want them to have an individual relationship with all of the players on the team, and having that is just really special, and it makes it much more enjoyable and beneficial. Whether it's beneficial for your skill levels, it makes you play better, at least for me, and it like gives you a better time when you're off the field. If they can relate to off the field, sports are a great comparison for that, and they like when I've had a great coach, it just makes me a better person during that time, even off the field, and that's what I want out of a coach.
First of all, you guys are brilliant. I'm just like soaking up the knowledge. Yeah. No, this is fantastic. I guess I just, maybe you sort of touched on it, but what would be the most important thing you each want to learn through sports that will help you the rest of your life?
For myself, I'd say I would want to learn just how to work well with others, and it's a pretty simple response, but there's a lot of things that come out of that. It can be whether it's just, you know, how to make friends and how to deal with like issues with other players, because a lot of times when you're on a team, it's not all going to be people, you know, you enjoy playing with or hanging out with. There's going to be times where you don't, you know, you're getting mad at each other. It's like the heat of a game, so emotions are high, and you know, being able to deal with that is a huge thing to learn that will carry out through the rest of your life.
I think for me, it's just like how to be a better person, not necessarily like becoming better at the sport that you're coaching, that they're coaching you at, but they're teaching you skills that you're going to use like in your life, like when you're in your 20s and 30s and when you have a job. And so not just like, oh, you should do this, like when you're in the game and stuff, but like what can you do like for leadership, for example? Like what's a good opportunity to like, if the team's down, for example, how can you like step up and say, hey, we're still in this game, get your head in the game, like we've still got this. So I think those like skills like that, for example.
Yes, I agree, because it's like I want to learn to be a motivational person, because when you're like down in a certain place in a certain time, it's not the best situation. So like to learn to have hope is always key, and that's what I want to learn about playing my sport.
What else? You're the lead teacher in this country, so I'll let you drive this conversation.
Describe your ideal coach.
For myself, my ideal coach is someone I can lean on in hard times. It's someone that when I make a mistake, while they're engaging and like happy for me, even though I made that mistake, they also are telling me what I did wrong and how I can improve on it in the future. They are just someone that can relate the game to outside of it, and to school, to just your personal life, and I really think I have that in Coach Mulatto.
Okay, so I agree with you completely. I think that one of my ideal coaches would be someone like I can talk to about anything, not like, oh, how can I do better on this play, but about school, about like a project maybe I have to do. And like I've done that with Coach Bonnie a bunch. We talk about whatever I'm doing in school and how I'm going to do it. But also someone that's like kind of someone that'll like make you that, like if you make a mistake or something, they'll tell you like, hey, it's fine, get it next time. But like they'll also say like you can do this in the future to make sure that like next time that, like, for example, if someone hits and it goes right through your legs, in the future they can tell you like make sure you're getting down and everything. And I think some that like cares about you, some that'll be like, some you can just talk to about anything. They'll care about you, and yeah.
My ideal coach would be more of part of family, that he becomes so close to you, like Rob. Someone that is like a friend more than a coach. Like outside of school, he checks up on you. He makes sure like you're doing good in school. Even if you don't attend the school no more, if you're in high school and not in middle school no more, he always checks up on me, and he just makes sure like you're not just focused on soccer, more of family issues. He's always there. It's just like he's more of a friend than a coach. So that's what an ideal coach should be.
I got one more and I'll shut up. You
Yeah.
Two-part. Do you learn more in practice or in games? And separate question, do you learn more when you win a game or lose a game? So practice versus game first, and then win versus loss.
I would say that for the second question, I learn a lot from both. It definitely depends on the situation. For me, like earlier in one of the segments, they were talking about the definition of winning and how it's not necessarily who had the higher score at the end. So it's hard to define that, but like I learn a lot from losing because everyone should. You should learn what you did wrong and how to do better with that. But then from winning, I learned how to be a good sport, and even with that, how to do better next time because there's always a chance to improve.
Games versus practice?
Oh, and yeah, sorry. And for games versus practice, I would say that I actually learn more from a game. When we practice, it's beneficial, but at least for me in Flagstar, a lot of the practice just goes into the game, and it's a lot different of a scenario. Having to execute in the heat of the moment is a lot tougher and just makes you appreciate the game a lot more than practice because it's really not the same.
I think for me, for the game or practice, I think I'm going to have to go with the game just because sometimes, like, if I make a bad play, I'll get really down on myself. But, like, you know, Coach Brian will come over and she'll be like, hey, like, your team needs you and you have to move on from that. I know you made a mistake, but you need to keep going. And then, well, for one example, in a game, I overthrew first, and then we went down by 1 run. And then I had the hit that gave us a 2-run lead. And so it was important because she sat me down and she said, look, I need your head back in the game, and you need to get your head, you need to be focused and just move on from the error. And I think that's important. And for, I think I learn more from losses because when you lose, there's probably something you did wrong. And so you can always learn from that. But if you you say that, Coach Ryan says this, that if you did something wrong, it means you were trying. And so I think that's important because if you lost, you were probably trying, but you messed something up. And so you can always learn from that. But if you're winning and you didn't mess something up, like, you can't really learn from that. And I think with losses, there's more emotion involved because you're sad that you lost, and you have to learn how to deal with that and how it's one game. It's not going to matter that much. And so you just need to learn. That's how life goes, ups and downs.
Well, in my opinion, I learn more from practices because in practices, like, the flow isn't like intense as a game. Because game is like you're focused on playing the game. But like in practices, it's like, oh, we're practicing for a game, but you also get a chance to talk to your coach and to get more in depth of what the game is gonna be about, like if the game is the next day. So practices teaches me more. It's just a better way, and I can be more comfortable than having the game on the same day, like learning something. And for, I would say both as well, because when you lose, you learn the mistake your whole team and your coach did, and when you win, you can just learn from it, like what to do again, for you can win again.
You know, Jensen, you talked about this a little bit earlier, but how important is, and Alice, maybe let me ask you this and start with you, because you did kind of answer it already. How important is it for the coach to know who you are, to know your story, to know what matters to you in your life in terms of being an effective coach and getting the best out of you and developing you?
I think it's very important because, for example, if one like technique of explaining something works best for you, and that's how it's worked for you in the past, if they know that, then they can use that. Because sometimes, like half my team, if like Coach Barney explains something, half my team will get it right away. But then she might have to explain it in a different way, and the other half of the team will get it. I think it's important because also if they know your background, like maybe they know something was going on. That means like, and if they really do care for you, then like you're able to talk to them about that, and they're not just focused on the sport; they're focused on you, and I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that. And like I was saying earlier, how important it is for your coach to have an individual relationship with all of the players. This is why. And when you have an individual relationship with all of them, you're able to teach them in different ways. And for almost all teams, like I can't think of any team that I've ever played on where everybody learns the same way. And so you're going to have to teach it differently. And a lot of players will understand in different ways, and to get the maximum beneficial coaching out of your team, you want to be able to teach everyone the way they need to be taught. And I think like if you have that individual relationship, you will get that.
Gotcha. So we only have a couple minutes left here, and we'd like to use that time to allow you to ask. We put you on the hot seat. Now you get to ask Mr. Duncan or myself any questions. Anything come to mind? Anything we can answer for you? Or
I do have a question.
Sure.
For you. Okay.
Ask him the hard ones. Give me
Okay, so I know you play a lot of basketball at Harvard and Australia. What was like your favorite? Like, what was your favorite shot or play like ever, and why?
It wasn't mine. You're probably watching Michael Jordan or Larry Bird. But I like to pass. I like to try and get my teammates in a good situation to score. So that's the part of the game that gives me the most joy.
I also have a question for you. Having played at both the collegiate level and Little League, we've talked about a lot of coaching methods. Do these apply to both levels or anything in between? And how does it vary between levels?
So I think the values that we're trying to talk about should follow all the way through all the different levels. I will say it's just reality that the further up you go, candidly, the more winning matters. And if my college coach didn't win, he would lose his job. If my professional coach didn't win, he would lose his job. I played in Australia. We were allowed 2 Americans per team. If we didn't win, I would lose my job. And Americans come and go very quick. Having said that, I actually think these values teach you how to win. I don't think they're in conflict. And if you learn how to be a good teammate, if you learn how to be coachable, if you learn how to, when things are tough, keep your head in the game and keep going, I actually think that makes you more of a winner. And so I think people see these things as being in conflict or in odds with each other, and I actually don't think they are.
Okay. I have a question. As a coach, how would you motivate your athletes?
The biggest thing for me is I want kids to love to play. I want them to like if it's work, if you're dreading going to practice, if you're doing whatever, that's taking the fun out of it. And for me, I was so lucky. I've always loved to play. I still love to play. And I think sometimes we as coaches sort of beat that out of kids. It becomes like a job. You guys are kids. You can get a job, a few years from now. You don't need a job now. And so the biggest thing is for you to love to play and to love to learn, because you have to keep learning like the rest of your life. You got to keep learning. Like the day any of us stop learning is the day we're not relevant anymore. So if we can keep you loving what you're doing and keep you loving learning, you're going to be in good shape, whatever happens, whatever you want to do.
Well, I'd like to give a big hand to our terrific panelists here. Alice, Jency, and Rajan, and Arnie as well. And with that, I'd like to introduce Dan Porterfield, who is the CEO and president of the Aspen Institute. He is someone who gets what we do. He is a former youth basketball coach in Baltimore. He, there's something about playing sports. If you haven't played sports, you don't really quite understand what we're trying to achieve here, and you don't realize it's actually tied into the fabric of society and can build a good society. So when Dan became CEO and president a year ago, we were thrilled. He's been a great supporter of ours. He gets the space in a huge way. So, Dan, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you.
So thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh.
Come on up. Well, that is the proverbial tough act to follow. And thank you all for being here. I'm Dan Porterfield, the president and CEO of the Aspen Institute. Huge supporter of the work of Project Play. Tom Ferry, his incredible team. This is really dead center on the mission of the Aspen Institute, which is to create a fair, just, and equitable society in partnership with lots of others. And engaging students in physical activity, in learning the lessons of sport, in understanding the power of we, is all what being a teammate's about. It's what athletics is about. It's what recreation is about. And Tom and his team have really moved the ball on all sorts of critical questions for our society. It's just a lot of fun to see. Besides being a youth basketball coach, which was a big part of my identity for a number of years, I later also was senior vice president at Georgetown, then a college president at Franklin and Marshall College. And in both those roles, I did a lot of work with our coaches and our athletics programs. At Georgetown, I oversaw athletics the last 3 years and actually served as interim AD for 1 year, recruiting Lee Reed, who's the current AD of Georgetown. One of my bosses at that time, besides President Jack DeGioia, was former NFL Commissioner Paul Tagliabue, who's here today. Paul, thank you for joining us, one of the greatest champions of sport in our society. So 3 coaches here. We just heard some of the students that you coach reflect. Can I ask you, each of you, to say something that you learned as you listened to Jency, Alice, and Raja?
Well, as I listened to Jency, I reflected the importance of establishing and maintaining a relationship with the family, the school community, and my player, and how deep and how important that is to continue success for yourself and me.
Yeah, it's a relationship with the whole person, the
whole
whole student, the whole family, whole community, absolutely. And they call you Coach Rob, right?
Coach Rob, yes.
All right, cool.
Coach Rob.
Yeah.
I'm coaching Rajan, and I learned a lot of things that I feel I already knew about him, but I also got to kind of witness his growth. I've been coaching for at least 4 years now, and he's shown what we've always known, that he is one of those very few competitive-minded students that really wants to be better, even if it's at the sake of him not touching the ball, even if it's at the sake of him not getting the play going his way. He is a we player, and it's awesome to hear that he really wants to hear the truth from a coach, no sugar, and he's like, give me the full straight up, and that's what I try my best to give him, on top of the optimism, and the cup is always half full with me.
Yeah. Thank you, Mwata. Bonnie?
So, from Alice, I think the big thing we think sometimes as coaches is we don't think kids are paying attention and listening, and yet they are. Because I remember the place you talked about. And that feeling at the moment when you're having that conversation, you're like, I don't feel like you're actually hearing what I'm saying. And that realization that actually what you're saying matters, and it stays with them for a long time. The other thing is that desire to compete. I think sometimes as a coach, we get a little hesitant about creating opportunities for competition because we worry about failure. And we really miss out on the value that competition brings when you do it the right way.
Yeah. So, because I get to work at the Aspen Institute every day, I get all these different programs that are all together, teaming up to make a difference for society. And the other one is the Commission on Social, Emotional, Academic Learning and Development. And it's just so exciting to see the SEED Commission and Project Play working together, teaming up, to get us to think about the social and emotional dimensions of working with young people. So let me ask you all, and we're going to do like lightning round so we can get a lot of questions in. And I'll start with Mwata this time, since you went first last time. They don't know what question's coming. So let me ask you, is there something that you have learned from the report now, in addition to learning from your students? Something you're taking away that could inform how you work going forward?
Absolutely. I feel that it reinforced a lot of things for me and kind of set my mind at ease that there are other people out there that are thinking the same way as me.
Yeah.
I'm currently a kindergarten teacher as well, and you learn a lot about patience teaching kindergarten. You learn a lot about, among other things.
Yeah.
And you also learn about the importance of teaching to where they want to get and finding out where they want to get.
Yeah.
These small little people have huge personalities and they have expectations as young as 5 years old, and I teach to those expectations. And it's awesome that you all have this, very, very keen understanding that it's bigger than the sport, it's bigger than the game. It's actually about producing successful people that want to win past winning, for lack of a better word.
Alice, how about you?
So I know
I'm sorry,
Alice
Bonnie.
and I,
I'm
it's
sorry,
okay,
Bonnie.
we're,
Sorry,
we're about the same
yeah.
size, and so it's
Sorry.
it's a really common thing. Alice is really excited about having a coach.
Sorry, Alice.
It's okay. It's okay. So for me, a couple of things that kind of came to mind, and one is actually something we developed while we were here, getting ready for this, which is giving kids more input into what we do, and really taking the time to ask them questions and listen and respond. So one of the things that the report highlights is the importance of getting to know your kids and really getting to them. We were sitting here talking, and we were talking about it, and Alice came up with an idea that we're going to integrate into our program this year, which is getting kids to fill out just a little, I call it a face sheet, like an about me sheet. Not just your name, what you like to be called, but who's important to you.
Yeah.
Who's somebody that you look up to? Why do you look up to them? What can I do as a coach to help you? And so learning to listen to our athletes and take sometimes suggestions and leads from them. I think sometimes as coaches, we're hesitant to give up some of that power and control, and recognizing that our kids have a lot of value to bring to the coaching plan.
Okay, so Mwata says perspective, it's about more than the game. Bonnie says listening and relationships. Coach Rob, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, in an environment where I work, it's an education campus, so we have pre-K 3 up through grade 8. And each year you find the program growing. You find a sense of more students wanting to be not only athletes, but to show themselves, whether it be on stage, whether it be in the community, whether it be in service projects. So the one thing that I gathered in listening was that in today's times, that we are challenged with the social media. We're challenged with folks who are willing to take our babies at an early age and take them somewhere else. We're challenged with the social media saying this is how it's done. We have to get back to the interpersonal relationships that develop at a very early age and maintain that sense of trust, just being human.
Yeah. Being human, trust, building relationships. I like a lot the calls for coaches that are a part of the report. Know every athlete's story, establish a supportive team culture, celebrate effort, focus on skills that matter, be a role model, be coachable, join forces. Okay, so starting with Bonnie, in these 7 challenges, calls for coaches, which is an area you think you as a coach would like to raise your game looking forward?
See, I'm going to cheat because I brought the list up. I think really at the end of the day, it's being coachable yourself, right? Being open to the idea that you don't know all the answers, even if somebody sometimes is turning to you as the person who's supposed to know the answers. And finding those relationships and opportunities to build relationships with other coaches in your sport and sometimes outside of your sport, hearing new ideas and new ways of thinking and doing things.
Yep. So different kind of question. Anybody can answer here. You all are leaders in your field. there are probably some percentage of coaches that say, I don't need this. I do it my way. I've got my it's worked for me. In fact, I know a lot of coaches at a college level don't want anybody in their locker room. So how do we address the barriers of some coaches, whatever the level, really just saying, I do it my way. It's my team, it's my program, I need to do it my way. This could go to any of the three of you. But
It's a good one. It's a good question. Oh, you can go ahead first.
I can go ahead first.
Yeah.
Guys are just so generous with that.
Yeah.
You know, I think sometimes, when we talk about meeting kids where they are, you need to meet the coach where they are. You know, and instead of just coming in and saying, let me tell you how to run your program or what you're doing wrong, come in and watch. Come in and talk. Invite them in to your space before you start telling somebody how you think they should do it. You have to create an environment in which, just like you want for your athletes, to create an environment in which they feel like it's safe to ask questions, it's safe to try, it's safe to fail. You have to do the same thing with your fellow coaches.
Yeah, that's great.
And to piggyback off of that, I believe that the communication is the key. I think that there should be a triangle, just like they talk about the triangle in education between the teacher, the student, and the parent. It should be the same with the coach and the student and the parent.
Yeah.
So just opening up new opportunities for parents and coaches and students to be transparent and on the same page will kind of fix at least some of those assumptions that parents may make just using their student or their child as the voice. They get to speak directly to the coach, and coaches should have an open door policy.
Yep, Coach.
What I found in the last few years is that sense of building community gets to a point where, and this may sound kind of off, but building community, you get your wins. And your wins come much deeper than just 1-0. They actually come with establishing a sense of, I want to see you tomorrow, or I can go to sleep tonight and rest, that I've given it my best shot. That's from a coach's perspective and a student's perspective and a parent support.
So another tough question here. In every program or team, there are dynamics particular to that group of people, and you work through them together to try to build a supportive team culture. Students are exposed to forces outside of the team. They bring into the team. And sometimes those forces might be myths about people based on their identity, let's say. One of the great things about teams, we bring kids together from different backgrounds. Any advice on how to work with those questions of the living, running conversation of how we're the same and how we're different when it plays out in the form of misunderstandings at the level of the team?
Well, we've had a couple of experiences at our coaching venue for our players. You may look at 15 to 20 athletes. You may even see them progressing from elementary to middle school. At some point in time, the question comes up, who am I? And am I going to be accepted by my teammates? And we had a challenge a few years, not even a challenge. We had an individual who decided to say, I need to talk with the entire team, the entire program about where I am, how I exist. What was more powerful in the acceptance of that individual was not so much me or the coaching staff. It was the community that was built by the teammates that said, we're wide open to listen. And that I will never forget that experience because I didn't know how to respond, but those folks that we had spent so much time with Monday through Friday and Saturday and sometimes on Sunday grasped this individual and said, we're still a team and we're still moving forward. And I will never forget that experience. I don't think too many adults could have handled what these children did that particular day.
That's amazing. Thank you.
That's for me.
Thank you. Wata, Bonnie, any thoughts on that one?
One thing that Flagstar does a tremendous job of is creating lots of opportunities for parents to give their insights and for those insights to be acted upon swiftly. There have been times where a player, in teacher mode, a player has voice concerns that maybe the ball's not coming their way, or that they're having a hard time grasping the offense or the defense, and it quickly gets to me, and we handle it as a family. So we've had player meetings before games, we've had player meetings at halftime, where everyone is able to voice how they feel, and we do not leave all the business inside the meeting, and these are ages from 3rd grade up to high school, and they're able to speak at the same level without bringing each other down, without bringing their ego into it, and just saying, what are we going to do as a team to make sure that everybody is winning their way? A win for every player may be different.
Yeah, conflict resolution is hard for any of us in our jobs. To be the leader of a team or a program means you have to manage the environment where conflict occurs. Sometimes that conflict's on questions of identity, so it's another level of difficulty.
I think maybe I come at this a little bit differently because I have a group of girls who are playing baseball. And so collectively, that identity is often seen a little bit differently. I can think of an example we were just at. It was at a huge national coaching convention, 6,000 coaches. It is the American Baseball Coaches Association. My program is DC Girls Baseball. It's very clear we are a baseball program. I got an email back from a vendor. You go to one of these and a million vendors contact you. And he wanted to know if I wanted uniforms for the upcoming softball season. I'm pretty sure that he didn't ask that of anybody else. And so for us, I'm in an environment with girls who are choosing to play baseball and sometimes navigating that space of being in an all-girl program, and then how they interact when they're in a co-ed program. And really talking about the value of they play baseball because they love baseball, and they should be comfortable with identifying themselves as baseball players. And how do I deal with then when somebody perceives me or labels me, and I say I play baseball, and they say, oh, so you mean softball? And helping the kids to really understand how they can identify themselves in that space, which I think is a big translation to learning how to advocate and identify yourself in other spaces.
Yeah, fantastic. That is so cool. And I'm looking at Melissa for a second. I don't know if you're watching the clock or if somebody else is watching the clock. Oh, good. Okay, I've got so many hard questions I want to ask. They weren't prepped at all for these questions. But you really are so thoughtful about this. I feel like I'm learning a lot as somebody looking up to you as a kind of a rookie coach compared to you all. So here's a question. Can you reflect back on your time playing and have a story about a coach who taught you or showed you something that informs you today in the way that you have chosen to be a leader as a coach? A saying, a moment. It doesn't have to be a long story, but just who helped make you the coach you are today?
Well, in 8th grade, my family, my father and moms were baseball and softball players, so they expected their oldest son to be a baseball player, and they did force me to go to play baseball. I never had the coordination of the hand and the bat to the ball, but I could run. So I would always get up to the plate and either strike out. And my 8th grade coach at that time said, Charles, for your size, you can run. And that propelled me into playing football. And because I'm built low to the ground, it's hard for me to roll over. But what that has taught me, seriously, what that has taught me, though, on the soccer field, if you can develop those skills of running and endurance, you can play any sport out there. You can compete anywhere. Yeah. And that's what I look towards when the children out there on the soccer field. Is there something else that you can do?
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
I was actually a big soccer player when I was young. And there was a time where my parents were both working a lot, and my coach actually used to drive me home every day after practice. Coach Patterson. I never forget those great coaches. And one thing that he used to always tell us was that winning came from within. And I remember the exact game when I truly believed it, because we lost, but we were just so happy to have lost. We played our hearts out. It came down to penalty kicks. I missed mine. and it was a shot that I haven't practiced in all week. But the first thing I told coach was, I want to get a net. I want to practice. I want to practice that exact shot. And just understanding that if you can make goals for yourself as a player and reach them, that you're always winning. There's no such thing as a loss.
So for me, I didn't have a lot of formal coaching growing up, but the thing that really stands out is the first time I had a woman coach. I can only think of one that I had when I was a youth, when I was in high school, when I was in college. And what really was that impression was the idea that really anybody who had passion and drive and commitment could serve as a coach.
Yeah. So let me ask you one more question to each of you then. So here we've got this spectacular report, and the checklist on the back is awesome too, as well as the big principles informing it. We have a whole commission on social, emotional, academic learning and how it all fits together. The will is clearly in the room for athletics and recreational experience to form mindsets and skill sets and orientations towards community and confidence and team that can be incredible battery pack for life. We all believe that here. At some level, we could be countercultural though, in that the country itself hasn't heard this message that much, except for now what we're doing. There's other individually for sure, but now we're trying to pull it together as a national movement almost, these values that you stand for. And so I guess I'd say, is there anything that you believe we should do with this report in order to support your work as a youth-centered coach?
You want to start?
I can start.
Yeah.
You can start.
Well, firstly, the report is very thorough, and it gives a great guideline on how to not only coach a child, but to also be more receptive to them and to meet them right where they are. So I feel like the biggest help right now, or the biggest tool would be to get it lots of exposure. It just needs to be seen. It needs to be practiced. It needs to be seen. It needs to be heard. There are lots of coaches that very much need these type of resources, and we should continue to congratulate the coaches that do utilize those, because just like in anything, by congratulating what you want, there will also come people that work towards that for that congratulations.
Yep.
So
Cool.
for me, I think you have to show somebody how to use it.
Yeah.
I'm going to go back to something Alice mentioned a couple of times, which is, when you teach me something, don't just hand it to me and tell me this is how we do this play. Show me how to do it. And so that taking this type of thing and then bringing it in, there are tons of coaching opportunities that are focused on how to learn a skill, right? I get 52 different kinds of drills to use in practice. The ability to give me then some concrete examples about how I can apply some lesson from this into my coaching plan. So being able to take specific things and show me how I can implement this into my practice so that I can use it the same way that I learned how to do a hitting drill or how to do a fielding drill or how to coach a pitcher.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
I think time and investment has to be made at the administrative level, whether it's in recreational sports or in schools, in order for coaches to have the time and the commitment and the training to say it's not about wins and losses. It's developing a culture in which folks who actually pay, folks who actually invest, say, I am investing in securing your time with this team to develop certain principles and values.
Yeah.
If it doesn't begin at this level, if it doesn't continue through high school, certainly through the NCAA, and as you move on, we're shattered.
Yeah.
We just become a competitive society, which no one cares.
Yeah. What a thoughtful way to conclude this. Invest in those that support coaches. Pitch it so the coaches can catch it, help it be usable and workable, recognize those who do it well. Thank you all for being here, brought to you by Project Play and the Commission on Social, Emotional, Academic Development. It's really cool to meet the three of you. Thank you for everything you do for our kids.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you. You did great. You did excellent. You did excellent.
Jackie Jodel will come up to close the program.
Thank you so much, Dan. So my name is Jackie Jodel. I'm the Executive Director of the National Commission. So I've been given the privilege of closing us out today. So that means I'm the only person between you and lunch out in the cafe. I will be brief. So I really can't think of a better way for the National Commission's journey to end than for Team Seed, the National Commission team, to join with Team Sports and Society in this great partnership. So special thanks to Tom Ferry for inviting us to participate in this opportunity. Thanks to Susan Crown for making it possible and to make sure that we had the support to execute. I have to thank Jen Lerner from the National Commission team, whose hard work you see here today. I don't know where Jen is. Tom has demonstrated the wisdom of actually hiring Jen into his group, which is a great sign of Tom's leadership. We also want to thank Marty Fox as well, who has really seemed like an extension of the commission team during the last few months. So most importantly, I want to thank the players and the coaches. So those of you who know me know that I am a crazy sports nut. And I have been blessed, like many in this room, by having a coach in my life when I was younger who was a transformative influence. And that coach taught me some things that I bring to work every single day. Those things like make sure that you know that your team members are working with you, not for you. Realize that great teams, good teams become great teams when members start to trust in each other, enough so that it shifts from the me to the we. And finally, as Alice mentioned, there really are no mistakes. Every mistake needs to be reframed as an opportunity to learn. So those types of lessons are absolutely reflected in the report that we have here today. And we really encourage all of you to embrace the report and to use it as we move forward. So I want to close here with a quote, and I have to apologize to the Commissioner Taglaboob. I'm gonna end with a basketball quote. This is a basketball group. I can tell we had Secretary Duncan. We've got the President and CEO Dan Porterfield with his basketball. So I'm gonna end with a quote from the legendary coach Bobby Knight. And I love this quote, and it's absolutely applicable to the work here today and the work not only with Sports and Society, but also the work that the National Commission has been doing. I never felt my job was to win basketball games. Rather, that the essence of my job as a coach was to do everything I could to give my players the background necessary to succeed in life. So this is the bigger picture, right? It's not just about the game. It's really about teaching young people the skills to succeed in life. So thank you all again for your participation here today. We really appreciate it. And please join us for a celebratory lunch right outside in the cafe. And Marty's looking at me. One last reminder, please, in the spirit of the environment, leave your name tags. Thank you, everyone.